Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please support my channel by contributing to my Patreon account so that I can continue making the audiobook series. Salah ad-Deen al-Ayubi, Volume 2, The Establishment of the Ayyubid State. Start of Chapter 7, Part 1. Salah ad-Deen al-Ayubi's efforts to unite the Muslims. The death of Nur-ud-Din came as a shock that no one was expecting. Whilst Damascus was celebrating the circumcision of his son on Eid al-Fitr 569 Hijri, the Muslim world lost him unexpectedly 2 weeks later. As soon as news of his death became known, all manner of greed and ambition was let loose, not only among the close family of Nur-ud-Din, but also among his emirs and military commanders, as well as the occupying Franks. Everyone was trying to get the most benefit for himself, in the absence of the man who had, until his death, held the fate of the region and of the Franks in his hands with dignity, courage, piety, and farsightedness. Nur-ud-Din left behind a far-flung state that stretched from Barqa and Yemen to Syria, Mesopotamia, and Mosul. If we examine the sequence of events immediately after his death, we will see that conflicts between various forces had begun, and that each group was taking action according to its level of power. The Zangid family in Mosul. Their representative and Nur-ud-Din's deputy among them was Saif ad-Din Ghazi, his brother's son. He had gathered his army to help him in fighting the Franks, and now he suddenly found himself heading towards Nusaybin and taking possession of it. He sent detachments to Khabur, which he captured and allocated as fiefs. Then he marched to Haran and besieged it for several days, taking possession of it after its ruler Qaimaz al-Harrani, Nur-ud-Din's Mamluk, surrendered. Then he besieged Edessa and took possession of it from the eunuch and servant of Nur-ud-Din. Then he sent troops to Raqqa, on the banks of the Euphrates, to take possession of it, and to Suruj. Thus the cities of Mesopotamia, with the exception of the citadel of Jabar, came under Saif ad-Din's control, and he reintroduced the levies and was lenient with regard to matters of entertainment and drinking. The emirs in Damascus held on to the child al-Malik as-Saleh, whom Nur-ud-Din had left behind, and who was only 11 years old. They agreed to unite and appointed the Emir Ibn al-Muqaddim as the leader of their group, as they gave him the role of the child's custodian, that is, a tabegh, to supervise his education. The Emir Shams ad-Din ibn ad-Dayyah was ruling Aleppo with his two brothers. He stayed in the middle between the Zangids in the east and the group in Damascus, even though he was a friend of Salah ad-Din and was inclined towards him. The Franks immediately took advantage of the situation and attacked the fortress of Banias at the southern entrance to the Golan at the end of Shawwal, 569 Hijri, that is 1174 Common Era. Nur-ud-Din's widow, with courage surpassing that of most women, according to William of Tyre, sent word asking for the siege to be lifted. The city paid a lot of money and was given a temporary truce, but King Amalric refused and continued to besiege Banias for 2 weeks, and used up his equipment there. Finally, he accepted the money, along with the release of Frankish knights who were being held captive. Then he went back and died. He was replaced by his son, the young leper Baldwin IV. This is according to the Frankish account. The Arabic sources state that Ibn al-Muqaddim came out to them in his role as a tabegh, and extended the offer of a truce in which he would pay a huge amount of money and release Frankish prisoners as well. And they agreed to these terms. It clearly seems that Nuruddin's widow, who was the daughter of the Atabeg Anar, was influential in Damascus as she held a leading position as the king's mother. Hence the letter was in her name even though the Atabeg ibn al-Muqaddim was the commander of the army and the man in charge of the state's affairs. He concluded a truce with the Franks, which meant the cessation of all hostilities. As for Salah ad-Din in Egypt, the news reached him via the Franks, and he did not believe it. He wrote to Nuruddin as follows: News has reached me from the accursed enemy about our master Nuruddin. Allah forbid that I should hear bad news about him. May Allah keep him healthy and bring joy to his people. The news is deeply upsetting and distressing. If Allah forbid it is true, then kings arrange matters so that their sons end up in power. I urge you by Allah not to let that cause division among us, lest the enemy achieve their goals. Do not become divided, and let that lead to your failure, because the enemy is surrounding us on all sides. We are supporters of this house, of Nuruddin, and will never let them down. His last wishes to us are already decided, and his son is in charge. Saad ad-Din Gumushtagheen is with him, so if this bequest is accepted, all well and good. Otherwise we shall support this son against his enemies. But if news comes confirming that he is alive and well, this is what we want. A letter came to him from the emirs of Damascus, signed by al-Malik as-Saleh, which read, May Allah grant long life to His Highness, al-Malik al-Nasir, and increase our reward and his concerning the loss of our father. The Just Master. The emirs who are present have gathered to affirm their allegiance and solemn oath to al-Malik as-Saleh, and there is no trouble preoccupying us here except the Franks. May Allah humiliate them. His Highness al-Malik as-Saleh, may Allah have mercy on him, has never relied on anyone except him, meaning Salah ad-Din, when such a calamity happens. He has put his hopes for his present and future in him, and has relied on him for himself and his son. Is there any helper, that is Nasir, other than an-Nasir Salah ad-Din? The emirs of Damascus wanted to reassure Salah ad-Din so that he would stay far away and regard his task as fighting the Franks only, because Nuruddin had delegated him to do that. They were aware of his strength and feared his interference. Salah ad-Din mourned for 3 days and wrote to al-Malik as-Saleh, offering condolences, and wrote to al-Malik as-Saleh, offering condolences. At the end of his letter he stated, As for the enemy, may Allah humiliate him. The servant, meaning himself, is after him, seeking him night and day, until he can uproot him from his foothold. That is the least of my duties towards your noble house. My service to you started on Friday 4th Dhul-Qa'dah, which is the day on which sermons began to be given in the noble name of al-Malik as-Saleh. The servant is today as he was yesterday to the one before you, loyal to the Zangid house. He will fulfill his duties towards you and strive to unite the Muslims. May Allah grant His Highness al-Malik as-Saleh long life and bring prosperity to the Muslims by means of him. May Allah help this servant in what he intends to do, which is to support his authority and increase the extent of his kingdom. In another letter after he wrote, The servant is continuing what he started, complying with the commands of the new king, supporting him, leading his troops and showing loyalty and sincerity. He is awaiting instructions so that he might comply, and to be given a task so that he might do it, and to be sent against the enemy, so that he might go. He hopes that there will come a day when Allah will expose what is in his heart towards His Highness, so that he might prove his loyalty and sincerity. Coins were minted in the name of Al-Malik as-Saleh, some of which were sent to the new ruler, and sermons were delivered in his name at the pulpit. Salah ad-Din continued to watch events in Syria and Iraq. When he heard news of them whilst he was in Egypt, he sent letters, sometimes protesting and sometimes advising or making suggestions. He heard that Saif ad-Din Ghazi had seized possessions of his late uncle, so he sent word to Al-Malik as-Saleh, rebuking him for not informing him about that, so that he could have come and helped him and prevented Saif ad-Din from achieving his goal. He heard about the Frankish attack on Banyas and the truce that Ibn al-Muqaddim had contracted with them for a large amount of money. He objected to this deal and wrote to a number of prominent people, as well as to Ibn al-Muqaddim and al-Qadi ibn Abi Asrun in Damascus, saying, "When I heard about the death of Nuruddin, I left Egypt with the aim of engaging in jihad and cleansing the land of the disbelievers. Then I heard about the truce which is humiliating to Islam. Our master the Sheikh is certainly expected to denounce that deal, for by means of his words, swords are put back in their sheaths and rights are restored." Salah ad-Din recognized the weakness of the emirs of Damascus from this incident. He heard about the dispute between the emirs of Damascus and Ibn Attiyah in Aleppo, then how the commander Shad Bakht, the commander of the citadel of Aleppo, had been able to conspire with Ibn al-Muqaddim to bring al-Malik as-Saleh to Aleppo and put together a plan in which they arrested Ibn Attiyah and his two brothers by treacherous means, after promising him the position of a tabigh of the state, and they put them in prison after beating and kicking them. Finally, Ibn al-Muqaddim, who was the ruler of Damascus, got angry and wrote to Salah ad-Din, asking him to come and intervene. Salah ad-Din stayed in Egypt for 3.5 months, until the beginning of Safar 571 Hijri, never tiring of writing letters. He was preoccupied with other two matters, the internal conspiracy of Kanz ad-Dawlah and the Norman Sicilian attacks on Alexandria, both of which posed a great danger. When they ended, he realized that the arrest of Ibn Attiyah was another indication that the emirs in Damascus were following their own whims, desires, and interests, and competing with one another, and they were not paying attention to the wishes of Nuruddin himself. Salah ad-Din believed that the son of Nuruddin should, after his father's death, be under the guardianship of Majd ad-Din ibn Attiyah and his brothers in Aleppo, who were his friends and allies. He trusted them, but their beatings and arrests by treacherous means made him think, "I am more deserving of fulfilling covenants and good efforts. If these people remain in authority, it will cause division. Egypt will be split from Syria, and the disbelievers' hopes of attacking Muslim lands will be raised." He wrote to Ibn al-Muqaddim in Damascus, denouncing what they had done, questioning how they had dared to transgress against the members and pillars of the state. Ibn al-Muqaddim wrote back to him, trying to dissuade him from these thoughts and suggesting that it was unacceptable to think such things. "Let it not be said of you that you harbored ambitions against the house that planted you, raised you, and established you, and helped you to become king of Egypt. It does not befit you, because of your good character, because of the close friends you have, and because of your kindness." Salah ad-Din was torn between fulfilling his duty of loyalty towards the house of Nuruddin and avoiding the accusation that he harbored ambitions toward it. It seems that a large number of letters he received from prominent figures and scholars in Syria and Damascus put an end to his confusion, and he decided to intervene. If he had not done that at the time, when the people were pinning their hopes on him after the death of Nur ad-Din, Salah ad-Din might not be remembered today, and his name would probably be just one among the many emirs of his era. From the end of Nur ad-Din's rule, Salah ad-Din was not just one of Nur ad-Din's most prominent emirs, but there was a military institution that belonged to him, and he had a family of cooperative military leaders, among whom were Shirkuh and Najm ad-Din Ayub first of all, then Salah ad-Din and his maternal uncle Shihab ad-Din al-Harimi, then his brothers, prominent among whom were Tarun Shah, Tughtagin, Abu Bakr, also known as Al-Adil, and Buri, and some of Salah ad-Din's nephews and his cousin, in addition to some of Salah ad-Din's sons, Al-Afzal Ali, Al-Tahir Ghazi, and Al-Aziz Uthman. So there were three generations of leaders and commanders who put themselves at the service of Nur ad-Din and carried his banner. Nur ad-Din put them together so that they could cooperate through the family ties they shared. Nur ad-Din was certain of Salah ad-Din and of cooperation of the rest of his relatives with him, and he was certain that Salah ad-Din would have full control over them as a group in Egypt, and he was also confident that Salah ad-Din was wise in his approach and management. Salah ad-Din's strength lay not only in this, but also in the rich resources of Egypt, both economic and human. The land that had become his fief was larger in area and greater in wealth than the original kingdom of Nur ad-Din himself in Greater Syria and Mesopotamia. His own emirate stretched from Barkah to Nubia to Yemen. Similarly, Salah ad-Din's situation was not like that of Nur ad-Din's other commanders. He surpassed them in strength, wealth, and status. None of the three sons of Ad-Diyya became prominent except one, and he did not have the same opportunities as Salah ad-Din had, for whom Egypt was like an environment or laboratory in which the potential of the Ayyubid family came to the fore. Salah ad-Din realized this fully, as did the other emirs. When the emirs of Damascus decided to unite and cooperate in opposing Salah ad-Din, Sheikh Ismail, the state treasurer, Al-Hussein al-Jarrahi, Shihab ad-Din al-Ajami, At-Tawashi Husam ad-Din Rayhan, and, foremost among them, Ibn al-Muqaddim, met in the presence of Al-Qadi Kamal ad-Din al-Shahrazuri, who said, "You know that Salah ad-Din, the ruler of Egypt, is the Mamluk and deputy of Nur ad-Din, and it is better to consult him with regard to what we are doing, and not to exclude him, lest he rebel against us and take it as evidence against us, because he is the only ruler of Egypt. He could expel us and brush us aside, and take care of serving al-Malik al-Saleh." These words did not meet with their approval, however, and they were afraid that if Salah ad-Din came to Damascus, they might have to leave. They thought that if he entered the land, he would expel them from it. Salah ad-Din completed his mission in Egypt, even though what was going on upset and angered him, especially what was happening in Aleppo, where Sunni Shiite division had taken place, and his friend Ibn Attiyah had been betrayed. He had written to Ibn al-Muqaddim in Damascus and to the emirs, saying, "If Nur ad-Din had known that there was among you someone who could take my place, and whom he could trust like me, he would have given him Egypt, which is the greatest of his possessions and provinces. If he had not died so soon, he would not have asked anyone to take care of raising his son and serving him except me. I can see that you have taken care of my master and the son of my master without me. I shall come and serve him, to pay back the favors of his father in a great manner, and I shall punish each one of you for his poor conduct in not defending his land. Thus he regarded himself as responsible for the state of Al-Malik as-Saleh and for protecting him and it properly. He wrote to the emirs in Aleppo warning them that he was coming to Syria, and they wrote back to him in an ill-mannered fashion. It seems that they thought that he was going to leave Egypt, so they wrote to the ruler of Mosul, asking him to come to Damascus and take possession of it before Salah ad-Din could do so. But the Emir of Mosul thought that this was a plot on their part, so he did not respond to their request. Meanwhile, the people of Damascus urged Ibn al-Muqaddim, who had come back to them, to ask Salah ad-Din to come and take control of Damascus, lest Mushtagin, who had taken over Aleppo, come and take over Damascus too. Many letters reached him asking him to come to Syria, so Salah ad-Din decided to do just that. End of part 1 of chapter 7.